Overrated. Time and time again, this is a phrase that is very frequently associated with comic book movies, comic book TV shows, whether they are live action or animated. And honestly, I feel like that word kind of gets thrown out there on a whim at times. It definitely is justified some of the times. However, a lot of the times, in my opinion, that word is used as a blanket statement to justify just simply disliking a movie. And that's why on this page, I am going to start a series where we discuss overrated or overhated. And we're going to go through Marvel, DC, shows and movies, live action and animated. And that's why today we are kicking it off with one of the most prominent cases that falls into one of these two categories. And that's why today we are talking Batman Hush, overrated or overhated. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. All right, Batman Hush. So this is a pretty popular comic book run that did get adapted into the New 52 DC movies, or otherwise known as the DC AMU. It's always fun to keep track of all the different acronyms, whether it's the MCU, DCU, DCAU, DCEU, etc. But that being said, this was a universe that definitely prided itself on adapting comics to be very, very true on screen. It gave us a great amount of combat, storylines, and it definitely took it up a notch from anything being considered childish or campy. Obviously, we got stories in the past like Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker, Batman Under the Red Hood that definitely took us to more adult places. But to me, this universe felt like it pushed the needle even further. And it definitely had its moments where it got insanely dark to the point where some of the movies were rated R. And that's pretty insane for an animated superhero movie in the DC universe. Again, I just want to kind of break down the pros of this movie, the cons, and then decide together, was this movie indeed overrated, or does it fall into the category of, yeah, it's just overhated? So first and foremost, as I always like to do, I want to go over the good in this movie. And in my opinion, this movie had a lot of good. I really, really enjoyed a lot of aspects of this movie. One of which is the inclusion of Batman's Rogues Gallery. Now, a lot of Batman films do have members of the Rogues Gallery, and oftentimes even include multiple members of the Rogues Gallery. But to me, this movie does it better than almost any other movie. Again, I say almost because some of the other movies do also include the Rogues Gallery very, very well, and definitely flush out the universe that is Gotham City. That being said, this movie gives us Clayface, Bane, Catwoman, Poison Ivy, Scarecrow, the Joker, Harley Quinn, obviously Hush, the Riddler. I may be missing one or two, however, I really, really don't think so. That being said, I just listed a fair amount of Batman villains that were all included. Not to mention the supporting characters in this movie. Obviously, you're going to have Alfred. As I mentioned, you have Catwoman, who in this movie is more so included in the Bat family. I'll get into that a little bit later. But speaking of the Bat family, we also have the inclusion of the Bat family, which obviously is something a lot of fans love to see. I obviously love that. Nightwing, my favorite DC superhero. So the fact that he is one of the Bat family members that is included in this movie definitely gives this movie more points from my perspective. And we also get Batgirl. We do get Damian Wayne, although it's very brief. By this point, it makes sense why he isn't a focal point of this movie. And him actually not being in it much leaves room for Dick Grayson to have more banter and more moments with Bruce. And we see that dynamic duo, which is always awesome to see. Obviously, Dick Grayson being the first Robin, that is always going to be a special connection. Speaking of special connections, this movie also gives us one of the few times we get to see Batman on screen in an animated movie having a love interest. And not only that, but revealing his identity to that love interest. To my knowledge, this is the only time in which he physically reveals his identity to his love interest. In The Killing Joke, Barbara does find out that Batman and Bruce Wayne are one and the same. However, she's part of the Bat family, so I don't fully count that one. And then in The Long Halloween Part 1 and 2, Catwoman is already aware that Batman is indeed Bruce Wayne. So again, I guess you could somewhat count those, but aside from those two, no one really ever finds out that Batman is Bruce Wayne. Andrea technically finds out, however, he doesn't choose to reveal it to her. It's something he's forced into, and it doesn't lead to any type of relationship progression. Whereas in this, we get Batman and Catwoman fighting side by side as their own dynamic duo. We get to see their relationship progress. You even have that funny moment of the two of them in the Batcave after a mission. Alfred walks down, sees what they're doing, and just walks away with a smile on his face because he is happy for Bruce. And throughout this movie, Dick Grayson is also pushing Bruce to pursue that relationship with Catwoman, furthering the dynamic and that brotherhood between Nightwing and Batman. Because at the end of the day, Dick Grayson cares about Bruce Wayne. He wants him to be happy, and he knows that him being alone is going to lead to him realistically being pretty miserable. That being said, that does not end the positive things about this movie. We also get some really good combat scenes in this movie. You get the fight with Bane in the beginning, and also a little bit later on in the movie, you get a brief fight with Poison Ivy. You get a fight between Batman and Superman, and although it ends in a somewhat silly way, I say that because in my opinion, Batman dropping those brass knuckles that were made of kryptonite was just silly to me. It made absolutely no sense and left him totally defenseless. And if not for Catwoman dropping Lois Lane off of that building, Batman would have probably gotten his neck broken. Because although earlier in that film, Batman tells Superman that he acknowledges Superman is still in there, I think he was only holding back because if he used his heat vision, it would have blown up the Daily Planet. And he knew that was Lois. So that part of Clark Kent was fighting for Lois. Would he have fought that hard, knowing that this is Bruce Wayne, knowing this is Batman, and knowing he shouldn't kill him? Maybe, but also maybe not. So to me, that's one of the moments in this film that makes me think, hey, Batman, what were you doing? Come on, keep those brass knuckles on. You need those. You're literally fighting Superman. However, that being said, it's still a really cool fight and a really cool moment between two iconic DC characters that this movie does give us. Another really cool thing this movie does is present a very awesome mystery storyline, which I always love seeing Batman in detective mode. He is the world's greatest detective for a reason. So seeing a movie in which he actually has to follow clues and figure out what's going on, and in a sort of whodunit type of movie, I really, really enjoy that type of story. Hush, when he's introduced, is introduced in a really cool way. They have him snipe out Batman's grappling hook, which takes him out of commission for multiple months, which again is really, really cool. So right from the start, you're set up with a really awesome story with a lot of potential. Obviously, Hush is a really cool character in the comics. They have other characters that interact with Batman throughout this movie, one of which is Amanda Waller, and you have that awesome interaction where Batman mentions the Suicide Squad and Amanda Waller kind of presses back at him too. And that's a dynamic that I always love seeing on screen. Batman versus Amanda Waller and just their verbal confrontations. It is amazing to see, especially in this universe where we've already seen the Suicide Squad Hell to Pay movie, so we do know somewhat of what Amanda Waller has been up to. That being said, I do believe that is essentially everything very positive about this movie, which again, we're almost 11 minutes into this video, and I still haven't even gone into any cons. So that should let you know that this film has a lot to offer. It does a lot of things really, really well. And even Commissioner Gordon, his inclusion in the film is really well done. He's not in it a ton, but the scenes he is in matter. They are impactful, and it furthers the dynamic between him and Batman, letting you know how much he and Batman do trust each other. And again, before we get into the cons, one of my favorite moments from this movie is when Batman is about to kill the Joker, and Commissioner Gordon has to talk him down. And he does this by telling Batman how much Batman means to this city. That is such a comic booky moment and such an iconic Batman moment for him to have to hold back in that moment. And even seeing the Joker confirm that, hey, I didn't do this. I want you to cross this line. I want you to break your rules, but for something I did. So it also gives us more insight into, in my opinion, the most popular DC villain we've ever had. Honestly, one of my favorite villains of all time. So again, that is all of the good about this movie. There is a ton. Now we're going to get into the cons, or rather, the con. And I say that because I really truly believe that this movie only has one con about it. However, that being said, the con is a pretty big one, as the title of this film is Batman Hush. And the big negative takeaway I had from this movie, even in my very first watch of the movie, was with the character of Hush. As many of you may know if you have read the Batman Hush comics, or even if you've played the Arkham games, you do know that almost every single time, Hush is revealed to be Thomas Elliot, a childhood friend of Bruce Wayne. Thomas's parents end up getting killed in a car crash, or rather, they almost get killed, and Thomas Wayne ends up saving one of them or both of them. Again, it depends and differs depending on which iteration we're talking about, but this makes Thomas Elliot very angry, because it was actually orchestrated by him. He wanted his family's wealth, and to him, that took away his opportunity to be wealthy and successful. In some other iterations, he is just envious and jealous of Bruce and the life he lives because he has access to his parents' funds, albeit because his parents are no longer around, but still. It always comes from a source of envy and resentment. In this movie, Hush is not Thomas Elliot. He is revealed to be the Riddler. And now, in some of the storylines, Hush does end up being the Riddler to an extent. A lot of the times, when Hush is first unmasked, he's either unmasked as the Riddler or Jason Todd. When he's unmasked as Jason Todd, it is indeed revealed to be Clayface, who is just masquerading as Jason, and then it is also revealed after that it is still Thomas Elliot. That being said, in the storylines where it is just simply the Riddler, he is just working for the real Hush. And Thomas Elliot is using the Riddler almost as a sort of proxy, a go-between, so that the suspicion is left off of him. However, they kill off Thomas Elliot in this movie. And I think, to me, the part that is a really big bummer, they make it a point to disrupt Thomas Elliot's grave at one point. So it has the audience thinking, hey, maybe Thomas Elliot faked his death. Maybe this is going down the route of him manipulating and using the Riddler. However, it is revealed later when you do see Thomas Elliot there, dead on the ground, that he indeed did die, and the Riddler is just the big bad of the movie. And that's where this movie does start to devolve, because then the final fight scene, although this is a Riddler who has bathed in the Lazarus pit, so he does have some sort of enhanced strength, and his intelligence has been heightened even more, and he has intimate knowledge about Batman, it still leaves the audience kind of disappointed, because as stated in this movie, the Riddler is typically a C or D list villain, and especially from a hand-to-hand perspective, there is almost no reason why he should be going toe-to-toe with Batman. Now, you could say the Lazarus pits had a certain effect on him, increasing his strength, stamina, all that. Maybe it gave him the memories of Ra's al Ghul, or anyone else who has ever bathed in the Lazarus pit, which to a degree is true, but still that starts to fade and he devolves into going back to just the Riddler, a pathetic villain as stated by Batman. So to me, that's probably the biggest issue with this movie. And although I don't fully agree with all the hate that this movie often gets, I do at least understand it. Because although the good is way more prevalent than the bad has to do with the title character, the main villain of the movie. Again, that would be like if they totally decharacterized Batman, if they just did his character a full injustice. I feel like that would be way worse because Batman is literally the title character, but it's still the main villain, and so it is understandable why people do get so up in arms about it. However, that being said, overrated or overhated? In my opinion, this film, when you take a step back, when you fully realize and fully watch the movie through once and then go through to watch it again. And once you understand that Thomas Elliot is not going to end up being Hush, so you don't have your hopes set for that, it is still an enjoyable watch. And on that note, I would have to say this movie is overhated because, as I said before, there is a lot of good that this movie does, and to me, the good does outweigh the bad. So if I had to put a stamp on this movie, I would say it is overhated. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.